I'm John VanWeelden. I'm going to tell you 5 pieces of financial advice, and then I'm immediately going to tell you that it's not advice, and and nothing I say today is to be taken as advice because I don't know you personally. Even if I use the word advice or recommend, I don't mean it. But in all seriousness, I do have to go through a bit of a disclaimer just to make sure that you all understand that all I'm doing is sharing what some very general knowledge that I've gathered over the past 25 years, very specific to, as Marcus said, today. I will have some things to share. If you're close to retirement, I mean, all we do is retirement. So I'm going to be focused on retirement, but even if you're light years away from retirement, I'm going to share some things that will apply to you. It's very general in nature. It is not meant, don't run off and do something I said today, because quite frankly, until you speak to your own advisor, I really can't tell you whether it's appropriate for you. However, having said that, I will paint with a broad brush now. And before we get to the 5 pieces of advice that I want to share, I want to go ahead and give you some perspective. I call this the economic outlook, but the irony there is anybody who knows me knows that I go very far out of my way not to try to predict what's going to happen, because I'm lucky if I'm right 50% of the time. So rather, I'll just tell you what it appears is unfolding, and then you can apply it as you see fit. So short term, I think most of us know, if we're kind of paying attention to the news lately, interest rates are falling. There's some disappointment that they weren't falling faster, but they've started, and we've been told that interest rates are going to come down a little bit more over the next 12 months. So that tends to fuel a bullish market, and it tends to push everything up in prices, the prices of literally everything: houses, coffee, cars, and stocks. So it should be bullish for the market. Now, if interest rate cuts go too long, then it starts to scare the market because they start to sense that something's very wrong, and that's why the Fed keeps cutting. So eventually, it'll turn a little bit bearish. But for now, I think you can expect to see the market continue to rise. Quite frankly, my personal opinion is the stock market over the last 10, 20 years is mostly been driven by inflation, not amazing companies. Not that there aren't amazing companies, but inflation has pushed everything up. Just look at the price of your house lately. So what does that mean for you? If you're acquiring interest-bearing securities or investments, I would encourage you to lock in rates now for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Again, not advice, but suggestion. Lock in rates for the next several years, because I think we're not going to see rates where they are right now for a while. And if some of us had the foresight to lock them in a year or 2 ago, then we're really happy, because we're still getting well up into the 5s. From a real estate perspective, it's kind of the opposite. I think you're going to see financing costs come down. That too will push the real estate market up. But as a buyer, I think you'll have an opportunity to either finance or refinance over the next 12 months at a much cheaper rate. So short term, we feel fairly bullish about just about everything driven by inflation and lower rates. Mid to long run, or mid to long term, I would say it reminds me a lot of the late 90s. I don't know the age of everybody on this call, but if you were around in the late 90s and you remember we crossed into 2000, that dot-com bubble burst and messed everyone up. What we're seeing today is the redefinition of value creation, storage, and exchange. So what happened in the end of the 90s was the internet started to become more commonly used, and think of that as the internet of information, right? That's when we started to understand how companies could use this technology to share information. And now we have every bit of information we never want at our fingertips. That's what's happening now with value. And you're going to be able to create, store, share, exchange value on an app on your phone. You'll be able to buy a house in minutes on an app on your phone. And exchange and have that ownership documented and exchanged in a what's the word I want to use, in a irrefutable way, right? In a way that can't be compromised. You're not going to see as many people stealing people's houses through mortgages. Anyway, we're going to see a lot of volatility in the traditional markets as that continues. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the emerging technologies. The trick is which of those companies is going to be around for 15 years, 20 years, and which of them will evaporate in the next 5. If you remember back to the dot-com bubble, a whole lot of popular names back then don't exist now. So let's switch gears. I'll tell you the top 5 pieces of advice I would give a group of people like yourselves that I don't know real well, but I'd say, hey, it's just good general advice. Number 1, take advantage of today's tax environment. What I mean by that is we all think taxes are too high. Nobody likes paying taxes. However, historically, current tax rates are actually very, very attractive. So I try to encourage people not to defer taxes. We are all taught from the first day of our first job to put as much money as we can into the traditional side of our 401ks or traditional IRAs, deferred taxes. Well, back in the 80s, that made sense because tax rates were so high, the top rates, that when you retired, you were almost guaranteed that your tax rate was going to be lower in retirement than it was when you were working. However, that's changed now. I sit with clients all day, every day in their early and mid 70s who have a tax problem. And they have a tax problem because they put so much money into these tax deferred accounts. And now when they're ready to withdraw against those and spend it in retirement, it's all taxable. So my suggestion is that you consider putting future deferrals in your 401k, 403b, IRAs, whatever you have, into the Roth side if your employer offers that. If they don't offer it, rattle their cage, get them to offer it. The same thing with matches. It is now allowable for companies to make the match in either the Roth or the traditional side. So if I put my money in the Roth 401k, a lot of companies will match me in the Roth as well. So the benefit of this is every dollar I put in that Roth side is going to grow for as long as I want, tax-free. I can pull it out tax-free, and I'll never have a required minimum distribution. So I'll never be told when I have to take it out. And if I pass it on to my kids or somebody else, they get it tax-free. So if you think about it, the sooner you can get a dollar on the other side of that tax fence, the better. I promise you, even though it's a little bit painful now, and you're going to spend a little bit more money on paying tax now, if you put it in the Roth side, over the next 30, 40 years of your life, when you're retired, it is going to pay off like crazy because it'll never be taxed again. And I deal with this all day, every day. If I could wave a wand, the one change I would make is that people walking in my door wouldn't have so much of their money in their 401ks. And then to piggyback on that, I want to tell you, it's because that great backpack you showed us earlier, the white, single strap. If you're close to retirement and you're ready to transition, spend your worst money first. It's counterintuitive. People retire and they're used to paying a lot of tax, so they want to spend their cash or their reserves first because, wow, I don't have to pay tax on this. But it's your lowest tax environment, your lowest tax bracket you're probably ever going to see. Spend your worst money first. Spend your IRAs, defer Social Security, defer pensions if you can, so that later in life, when you're forced to take those streams of income, you're not also forced to take this worst money that's also taxable, and that's your tax deferred money. So number two, stay flexible. So I just told you to try to put some of your long-term savings in a Roth environment, whether it's an individual Roth, a company Roth, 401k or whatever. Then the second thing I encourage you to do is put money in an after-tax account, whether it's a savings, a money market, or a basic brokerage account. Once you've got some money in that Roth, which is the most tax-favored environment, then try to avoid putting a lot more money into segregated accounts that can only be used for one purpose, whether it's education savings or whether it's for a house down payment or whatever. If you keep this second piece of money liquid and available to you, you can still use it for retirement or weddings or house down payments or cars or vacations, but keep it as flexible as possible. That's because unless you're at the very end of your life, there's a lot of things that can come up that you'd want to spend your money on. And then once, if you have literally maxed out your Roth options, if you've put away a lot of money in after-tax investments and you still need somewhere to put money, then and only then, I would suggest circling back around to retirement and putting money in something like permanent life insurance or an annuity. Number three, I want to encourage you to shift your focus near retirement. The closer you get to retirement, the more I want to encourage you to focus on mitigating risk versus pursuing growth. Most people during their working years are maybe 70, 80, 90% stocks, maybe 100% stocks. And I get it. It's where the growth is. It's where the punch is. If we had more time, which we don't, I would take you through the math and I would show you how losses hurt more than gains help. Meaning, if I have 100 grand and I lose 50%, now I have $50,000. If next year I make 50%, I'm not back to 100. I only have 75. And it works the opposite way too. If I lose 50 first, if I gain 50 first from 100 to 150,000, then I lose 50%, I'm back to 75. Because compounding means that negatives hurt worse than pluses help. So I could literally show you a scenario where two of us invested over the next 10 years. One of us got an average return of 4%. One of us got an average return of 8%. And if the person who got the average return of 8% experienced a lot more volatility, which is likely to happen if you're shooting for a higher rate of return, believe it or not, even with those rates of return, the person with the 4% average can have more money in their account at the end of 10 years. It sounds crazy, but it's what we call the flaw of averages or the arithmetic of loss. So how do you protect yourself as you get close to retirement? There's only two ways: guarantees and expertise. Guarantees are ways that you can shift the risk to third parties. Expertise is relying on someone to manage that risk for you. I liken it to driving a car. My guarantee is my insurance company, and my expertise is the fact that I'm not texting, I'm wearing a seatbelt, I'm driving the speed limit, or something thereabouts. Same thing with investing. So focus more on mitigating losses as you approach and get into retirement. Because remember, when you're working and the market drops, you're putting more money in and you can buy low. But when you're retired and the market drops, not only are you not putting more money in, you're probably taking money out. And that money will never be there to recover. Number four, I strongly recommend, obviously we work with people all over the country. You can always call us. But regardless, if you have a financial advisor and you're approaching retirement, when you're within 5 years of retirement, I strongly recommend you find someone who is a true retirement specialist. It's kind of like you've got a brain problem. You need to go find someone who's a neurologist. You need to focus on someone who understands that part of your body. Retirement, you need to find someone who focuses on that part of your life. So what does it mean to be a retirement specialist? They need to, yes, deal with investments, and they need to understand what that means to deal with the retirees' investments versus a 30-year-old's. Income planning is also very different than investment planning. You're going to have maybe a pension, maybe Social Security, maybe IRAs, Roth IRAs, maybe after-tax investments. You might have, I don't know, rental income. You may have a part-time job. That's 7 different types of income I just mentioned. All of it is taxed differently, and all of it affects how the other ones are taxed. So a real retirement plan means that you're literally projecting and seeing over the course of the rest of your life, what resources, what income, what money am I spending today? What am I spending, a few years down the road, and even further than that? You should literally be able to see every year of your life what money, what resources you think you're going to use and why that's the most efficient. Tax planning is another one. Taxes will be your highest expense in retirement unless you do something about them. I promise you that. And that doesn't mean a tax preparer. That means someone who can help plan your taxes for the next 30 years and get ahead of those problems today. Healthcare usually has to do with Medicare and long-term care, survivor, estate, and legacy planning. When you're alive is one thing. Eventually, if you're married, you or your spouse, one of you is going to pass away first. How's that going to affect your planning? And then eventually, what resources are you going to leave for your beneficiaries, and how efficient will that be? That's your legacy planning. Last but not least, we recommend building guaranteed income sources. When you get to retirement, our experience says try to create a situation where 80% of your retirement income need will come from guaranteed sources. Those can be Social Security, pensions, annuity, long-term fixed income, earnings if you're working part-time, rental property, permanent life insurance. In theory, if I need $10,000 a month to live comfortably in retirement, I would like 8,000 of that to be guaranteed. I don't care what the stock market does because it's not going to affect my income. And if 20% or less is beholden to what the economy is doing, then I've got a pretty secure retirement. And so that 80% is our general rule. You might like more or less, but that's kind of the general idea. Okay, last thing I'll say is if you like those ideas, grab The Real Deal on Retirement. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible, pretty much anywhere you can buy books online. And with that having been said, I will take a breath and take questions if you have them.